Hello and welcome to our second hour. It's great to see you back here again. And we are here to do the third in our directed reading classes with Allie. And this week we are talking about Bill Bryson's book, A Walk in the Woods. If you read it, you might think it an interesting choice. It is, as one of the reviewers said, a good cross between Garrison Keillor and Dave Barry. A tad bit irreverent at sometimes, very funny at other times, but just an interesting book, completely different than the other pilgrimage books that we've shared. Talking, which I think will have some really interesting points. So I'm joined here with Paul and Allie. I'm Laura, so to start out with, Allie, Paul and I, when we agreed to be your professors, opted to let you make the choices for this directed reading, which obviously, and this is a book you chose, and I have a feeling there's a personal reason why you chose it, not only for its good humor, but there might be something else a bit more connected to you.
Well, gosh golly, you're correct. So I chose this book, A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson, in large part, really entirely in part, because it is about through hiking the Appalachian Trail, something that I have some experience with, as well as it's just a really, as Laura said, it's irreverent, but it encapsulates, I think, this really beautiful spectrum of nature conservation efforts, and then one person's
History.
own, lots of history of the trail, one person's own really specific journey throughout, but also you see some other tangential characters and you see relationships, and so it's this great little like microcosm that's happening on what I think is the most beautiful trail in the world, and to have that as a lived experience by an author whose voice is just so funny and so quippy and resonant, and you need a certain level of, I don't want to say crassness, but reality, I think, when you're writing about wilderness hiking, and Bill Bryson brings that in a big way. So those are largely my thoughts behind choosing this book, in addition to just being a little homesick for the AT.
Little homesick. So if you didn't catch on, Allie herself has hiked the Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine, straight through.
Amazing.
And so what year did you do that?
So I did that between my junior and senior year of college. So that would have been 2016. Summer of 2016. I did what's called a NOBO, a northbound hike. So I started at Springer Mountain in Georgia and hiked all the way up. I took a couple little stops with people and places that I knew, and so that was nice. That was my taste of civilization, but largely other than that, it was me in those woods, and it was a really beautiful experience. While you're out there, you develop what's called a tramily. They're your trail family. I'm still in touch with many of them. Lots of different walks of life attract people to the Appalachian Trail. People who have never hiked before. It's really interesting to hike with people who have never hiked before. And then lifelong hikers, people who are coming back to through hike for their third or fourth time. Really, really remarkable.
How many people don't make it? I mean,
don't make it as in
not
die.
expire.
Don't make it.
No.
What a question.
No, I don't want to know that number, but I mean, there's got to be a huge drop off rate.
Yeah, there is. So about 60% of the people who attempt the trail do not end up completing the trail. There isn't a good demarcation about how many people attempt and complete some portion, as we read about in the book. There isn't a great marker for those folks. But
So one of the hidden secrets of the Appalachian Trail, no longer hidden to the members of Southport Congregational Church after this question is released, though, is that it is tradition to have a name given to you on the trail. So, Allie, please let us know, what was your trail name?
My trail name was, and still is, Big Ups. Big because I am small, and ups because I was always smiling and giving thumbs up. So big ups.
All right, you heard it here. Big ups. If you ever need her attention, she's not answering. Just yell out big ups.
Big ups.
So getting to the book, so this whole directed reading was on pilgrimage and faith journeys type of thing, and we were discussing a little bit earlier. It's interesting that none of us felt that when Bill Bryson started this journey that he had, in to draw into your sermon, a good why. Right? He kind of, I think he went out there with the hopes of maybe getting some information to write a book of some sort, which is a why. But he didn't, as far as like a pilgrimage journey, it didn't really seem to have that focused intent.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree. I think that you talk about like the tensile strength of something, right? Like the amount of weight it can hold. His whys were pretty loosely formed, and and very materialistic in a lot of ways. I think it's fair to say that at the front end of the book about him, definitely that the why was in question.
And usually that's not enough to carry you through tremendous adversity, and the trail gives you that adversity, right? And so in order to keep going, so what, I don't want to jump the gun or anything, but what was it that changed?
Yeah, so I think again, going back to the sermon this morning, Paul, that idea that, right, your why has to be really strong so that it can overcome whatever that how or what looks like, and that how or what on the trail is really intense. It looks like loneliness, and it looks like physical fatigue, and it looks like challenge, and it looks like potentially draining social interactions, and definitely a lot of fear there as well, right? You come into contact with, I think, more existential fear when you're on your own and when you're in a wilderness setting than often in other settings. And so I think coming into contact with that, your why has to be pretty robust. And I think as we go through the course of the book with Bill and his friend Katz, who really is a character, you see more and more how he's moved away from this, I'm gonna hike the Appalachian Trail, I've lived out of the country for 20 years, I'm gonna come back, I'm gonna get in shape, it's gonna be great. It was this sort of myopic, single-minded enterprise that then grew into this, but wait, there are so many things happening out here, like, this beautiful, Delaware watershed, and can't we do something about this, and the wreckage that has come upon it, and it was like the horizon for him got so much bigger, and he lost that narrow, focused, fragile agenda, and just sort of, you talk sometimes about becoming, and whenever you talk about becoming, you go like this, right? And I think that throughout the course of this book, that was what happened. For this particular pilgrim, he became in a really beautiful way.
Yeah. And through the adversities, let's see if I can remember the quote, that we, the kind of the true nature of a person is revealed a lot of times, not in the good times, but in the adversities, right? That tests us. And I love, I do love, the hiking as a great metaphor, as a spiritual metaphor, right? With everything that it involves, like you mentioned, the beauty, the challenges, all those different issues, literally the ups and downs, and figuratively the ups and downs, and the beautiful days, the crazy storms, all of it.
And I think too, it's interesting, not having a strong why when he started out, and I just have to say it. None of this, like Paul's sermon, wasn't planned around this, and it's crazy how God interweaves everything like this. But without a strong why, I think what happened to him for a little bit is that his why just kind of imploded, and suddenly he's bombarded with all of these experiences that have happened to him. The environmental being one, both the good and the bad. Being faced with a bear, but also seeing the destruction at the Delaware Water Gap, and also I can't remember the name of the town that had the underground fire that just took out the whole town in Pennsylvania, but it's just gone. It's wiped out. It started out with the landfill. the landfill people lighting a fire to reduce the landfill, and it caught an underground mine on fire, and then it destroyed the whole town. So environmentally, he finds those kinds of things. I think he was pretty settled in his relationships. I mean, he had a good family growing up. He went, over to England to study and met a woman and got married, and they moved back here and had children, and then you juxtapose that against Mary Ellen and Chicken John and all these cats, even
Right.
this guy who came out of nowhere, right? And I think that when we are on our own pilgrimage, if we're on our own faith journeys, if we don't have a good why, if we don't understand that we're seeking God and seeking God alone, then the same thing will happen to us. We'll implode, we'll get distracted by this over here and that over there, and people will take us off course. Chicken John, if you didn't get to that part of the book, or is this guy who's notorious for getting himself turned around and hiking in the wrong direction, and people would find him and turn him around and put him back on the path. And there are people that can do that to you in your own faith journey. And there's another person that they meet, this Mary Ellen, who kind of gloms onto them and forces herself upon them, and they have to actually take some extreme measures to literally ditch her, kind of thing.
Right.
And that happens to us on faith journeys as well. So if you really want to be focused on your faith journey, on your pilgrimage, you have that why of, I'm here to seek God, and I'm not going to let this distract me or this person take me off course, and always kind of bringing yourself back around again to the place that you want to be.
And I think the other part is, there's a quote that was coming up as you were talking. It says, life is what happens when you're making other plans, right? And we all know that quote. But with a spiritual pilgrimage, with a faith journey, to be prepared to receive different gifts than what you thought you wanted and what you thought you were going to get. And if you can that's where the richness comes, right? When you have that kind of openness, and you just get a wealth of surprises and a wealth of gifts. If you're not just, focused on the one direction, one path. This is who I'm going to go with in my journey. This is what it's going to be like.
I think that's true if you're following a person or an idea. I agree. I think though, your focus on God, when you're like, I'm going to find God. I'm going to find God. And yes, you find God in people along the way and experiences along the way, for sure. Absolutely. But you mentioned being prepared. Now, when you hiked the Appalachian Trail, I imagine you were well prepared.
Yes, I took several courses. I had spent a few years as a outdoor program leader for the outdoor program at the college I attended. I was a wilderness first responder. I basically lived outside voluntarily, even though I had like an indoor bed. So yeah, a lot of preparation goes into that, and especially the particular program that I was part of was really adept at making sure that we were situated for safety and success in those ways. But I think, when you talk about preparing for any sort of pilgrimage or any sort of spiritual journey, how do you do that? Like, what sort of list do you make?
Yeah.
It's like, I want to be centered on God, and yes, whatever arises, love that. What kind of packing list do you make for that?
Yeah.
Like, that's I think a really
My Bible.
my Bible, right? Yeah. But a really resonant question. And yes, on the Appalachian Trail, there are specific tangible things that you take and that you need. But then there are others and other ways to equip yourself, I think, that are equally as important as that nice fluffy sleeping bag.
And I think Bill started this as it's termed Reeboks hiking, meaning he did zero preparation. His friend Katz, even less preparation. Katz arrived with a backpack full of Snickers bars and like 30 pounds of Snickers, and thought he was going to hike that 50, 60 miles a day, because he needed it for his blood sugar type of thing. So there's there is value for sure in being prepared and, looking around you. What have other people done to prepare for a journey, to prepare for a pilgrimage? And, what worked and what didn't work type of thing. And learn from that maybe before you step out into it. But on the other side, they learned a lot by hiking in their Reeboks and, carrying some Snickers in their backpack. And I think one of the things about the Appalachian Trail, from what I understand, is it's littered with cast off items because you want to be the lightest you can possibly be. So your cast off becomes somebody else's gift and necessity type thing. And that's true too in a faith journey. I mean, there are things that we realize that we want to cast off, extra weight that we're carrying, things that we don't want to have with us anymore, that we kind of lay down, but might very well be a gift for somebody else to pick up and makes their trip better and easier.
Right.
I'm just going to jump in here and we'll go back to what you're going to say. But we wanted to invite people to make comments. If you want to make any comments, if you have any questions, there's a comment button thing that you can put, and then you can write in a comment and question, and you can be a part of the discussion too.
Yeah,
please join us.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So one of the things, I love it because the Appalachian Trail ends in Maine, which is great.
Laura has a fondness for Maine.
Just a little, if you didn't know that. But one of the so if you didn't read the story, they stopped hiking. They can't do it, and they decide that they're going to go back to their lives, and then they're going to meet up again a little bit later and hike the last part up to Mount Katahdin and ended up there. And so when they've regrouped and they're in Maine, at one point, Bryson goes off to get some water and he loses Katz. And he doesn't know if Katz is in front of him or behind him. He's not back where he left him. And so he chooses to carry on. And then when he gets to the site where they were going to meet that night, there's no Katz. And that kind of fear of that was scary. What has happened to him? And again, a really good illustration for our own pilgrimage is that there's times, even when you're the most prepared for a pilgrimage or a faith journey, and you've got everything with you and you've cast off everything behind, there are still moments of fear and doubt and loss and being lost and having loss, where, especially in a faith journey, something might happen where suddenly your faith, that foundational faith that you thought you had starts to crumble or shake underneath you. And then that's okay. I mean,
because it's replaced, because then it's replaced by something. And a lot of times, people fear when we're talking about a faith journey, we fear when our, some system of beliefs, starts to crumble and shake. And to me, where the living God comes in is replacing that with the truth. And I mean, I don't want to get off course, but with a book that Mother Teresa put out, or I guess it was her diaries, that she didn't put it out, but after she died, and it was, talked about her, there were times when she had some crumbling faith, and I wished for her that she would have allowed, the living God to come in when certain, doctrines, when certain preconceptions that she had weren't feeding her in that way. So.
And I think we know that foundations that crack when you repair them are stronger. Bones, when they break, when they repair, are stronger. And so often we are afraid of the cracks, but we don't really need to be, because from those cracks can come great strength.
Well, it's the Leonard Cohen, that's where the light gets in.
Yeah. Do we have a question?
So we have a question from Paul DePrado. It says, "Hi, Laura and Paul. Would you consider your cross-country bike trip a pilgrimage in any way similar to the 3 books reviewed?"
I mean, my first response, even before you completed that, was absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, you know, and you get tested in some of the same ways. Interestingly, we were talking before we went on camera that, that the Appalachian Trail and the cross-country bike trail, the Trans Am Trail, they intersect and they cross at a number of different parts, at least in Virginia.
Yeah.
And I can't remember where else. But
no,
yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful, you know, with the, we didn't really experience horror, but, you know, with the extreme challenges, and I mean, we were in some unbelievable lightning storms, crazy lightning storms at night, fortunately. But, you know, between that and then, and I remember, you know, when we hit the Blue Ridge Mountains, and it was a spectacular day, and we just stopped, and you
Sang.
sang.
Surprise.
Sang. Just, you know, out there in the middle, and there we were, you know, two bicycles.
How great thou art.
The mountains.
Can't
and
help it.
Laura just starts going, you know,
School.
oh, no, you know, how I know someone.
And a guy rode by and stopped and sang with me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think I've talked about this maybe in smaller groups, maybe not to the whole congregation, but you all lived those previous years with me, with the death of our nephew and the death of my father and the death of my mother, and all of that. Our nephew and my mother had just happened in December and April. Actually, today's my nephew's birthday. Would have been my nephew's birthday. And we left in May, so, or early June. So it was just a couple months, and I needed that trip to, and I intentionally went on that trip to find myself kind of again, because it was a moment of kind of, I will admit, you know, there was a foundational kind of faith shaking, kind of cracking kind of going on. It was a lot. And I think I've said, you know, every morning we'd put on our helmets and we could talk to one another with our helmets. And you would talk to me and you'd start out, you know, you'd say, Laura, and I'd say, yes. And you'd say, are you crying? I'd be like, yes. And you'd say, okay, I'll call you back. And I'd be like, okay. Yeah. Because I just had a routine that I needed to do every day to process. I needed to think about everything that had happened. I needed to go through it in my mind. I needed to sing my songs and say my prayers. And then, you know, I could, but it was that pilgrimage. It was that journey that I found, literally, I found the strength that I needed to climb the big mountains.
To climb the mountains. Yeah. And I think that that's something that I think this is true, that all spiritual pilgrimages require is the spaciousness, whether you have it through cycling, whether you have it through Appalachian Trail, whether you have it through, you know, going to an ashram, whether you have it through a weekend or longer silent retreat, whether you have it with, you know, morning journaling in a quiet space, or scripture reading, or, you know, looking at the birds in your backyard or something. It requires a certain spaciousness so that, and this is how I think of meditation sometimes, is to let the stuff that needs to settle, and then to let the other stuff that needs to bubble up, you know, bubble up. And that's something that we don't get in the normal days and weeks and years that just go by with stimulation, kind of never ending, and the quietness that sometimes people are afraid of. And sometimes people don't even realize that they need. But the quietness creates that spaciousness to let that happen, the settling and the bubbling up.
Well, what about you? What do you think some of the things are that you discovered on your, if you don't mind us asking on camera?
Not at all. No.
On your
So
trip.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Tell us.
I found that, so my why going into it was not entirely unlike Bill's, in that it was kind of nebulous. It was, oh, this would be a cool thing to do, and my college lets me do this, and oh, neat, college credit to hike the Appalachian Trail, how cool. But it didn't have a really important scaffolding there. And so I got about 2 weeks in, and I was hurting. And I was laying in my little hammock tent tarp thing, and was like, wow, I really need to reevaluate this because, and I didn't have the terms at the time to say I need a stronger why, but I did, and I think that was the really pivotal point at which it became a pilgrimage and not just a trip, right? And not just a hike. It became something more because I reoriented in a way that asked questions of myself, that asked questions of God. You know, in what ways should I be a person of God in the world? Was one of them. You know, how can I love better, and not just more, but intentionally better? Was also another one of them. And then in contemplating, you know, what am I really supposed to be doing with my life and seeking those passions? And I knew that being out there was one of them, and so I had that checked off. But it's amazing what passions are revealed to you as you are participating in something about which you're passionate. How much that quiets some of that noise. You're speaking about Paul, and how much it focuses. It's interesting. It's sort of a dull focus, right? Because it brings you in from this either really myopic, scoped in kind of hardcore agenda that I have a knack for, that I'm trying to break myself of a little bit, or you're up here and you've got the bird's eye view and you're thinking, oh, okay, but in it from neither perspective are you really in it and feeling the tidalness of it, and coming in and out, and the ebbing and flowing of it. And so just being in it, a commitment to being in it, and a desire to find that peace in movement, I think, was really a big deal for me.
I do think it's really common on journeys, faith journeys, pilgrimages, to have that moment in which you have to make a conscious decision to whether you're going to keep going or not.
Absolutely.
There just comes almost a breaking point. And for me, it was in
Sinclair, Wyoming.
Yes, it was Sinclair, Wyoming.
The home of Sinclair Oil.
Oh my!
We'll
And that's
find
all. That's all that's in Sinclair,
God
Wyoming.
bless you, Sinclair.
Yeah, but that was my breaking point. I got off my bike and I just started to push it, and I was like, I'm gonna call my friend and she's gonna come get me, and I'm not gonna do this ride anymore. And it was just, the wind was blowing like 30 miles per hour against us, and there was nothing in the town except homes of the people who lived there, and the nearest grocery store was like 30 miles away, and we had to bike another 20 miles to get. It was just a disaster. It was a breaking point. But I, you push through it. You get those moments, and you decide, and you decide. And we were actually talking about that, in women's group earlier, when tragedy strikes you, and you have a spouse die or a child die or something. There's a moment in which you have to decide after some time of how you're going to carry on. What is your life going to look like after that?
Am I not going to go forward? And the choosing to be happy with those,
even though you're
things,
not.
Happy-ish
until
Right.
You have to choose to be happy until you can be happy again. Yeah.
It's a conscious choice, a very hard decision to make.
For sure. I think at the end of the book, and you have something at the end of the book that you like too, so I'll share mine and then we'll wrap it up with you and your reflection. So at the end of the book, he ponders, he talks about hiking, and he says, when hiking, you have no engagements, no commitments, no obligations or duties, no special ambitions, and only the smallest, least complicated of wants. You exist in a tranquil tedium. I love that. A tranquil tedium, serenely beyond the reach of exasperation. And I thought, it's interesting that he could write that amidst all the turmoil that he started out with, and he comes to that moment. I think that's so true also of faith journeys and pilgrimages too, right? That you just come to this moment in which all the stuff has happened, and you're just like, okay, I can just be in this now. I can just settle here, and it's all good.
Yeah.
It's-
Sometimes it comes in a time of quiet and spaciousness.
Yeah.
Ironically, sometimes it comes in the midst of,
Chaos.
the worst chaos possible.
Yep.
That you have that clarity.
For sure.
Which you have.
Yeah, that's so true. In a sort of similar vein, at the very end of the book, he says, I understand now, in a way I never did before, the colossal scale of the world. I found patience and fortitude that I didn't know I had. I discovered an America that millions of people scarcely know exists. I made a friend. I came home. And I have circled here in my version, I came home, because that idea of home is so fascinating to me when you're on a spiritual pilgrimage. And is home, your physical place? I tend to not think so. I think you're coming home to yourself and coming home to God. And in coming home to God, you realize God never left, right? That God was there the whole time. But you're coming home to yourself in a way that you can now fully appreciate the presence of God. And so he certainly didn't mean it that way, but I love that I came home at the very end of that.
Beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Amen.
So there you have it. That's our third and final of the directed reading study for Allie. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for coming to Yale.